So I think a lot of people are saying this country cannot survive unless it goes back to traditional American norms, and the nuclear family has to be the dominant paradigm. That doesn't mean you oppress gays or single parents or illegitimacy, but you have to have a critical mass that are a nuclear family, and you have to reproduce the species. And the blue state model and the progressive agenda is antithetical to that. Let's just face it. And it's violent.
Hello, ladies. Hello, gentlemen. Hello, my slurping friend, Victor Davis Hanson. This is the Victor Davis Hanson Show. I'm Jack Fowler, the host of this show. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. He's a man with a website, The Blade of Perseus. You'll find it at victorhanson.com. You notice Victor's background's a little different. He is in Palo Alto, I believe, today. So that's the People's Republic of. Survive, Victor. We are talking on Sunday, September 14th. This particular episode will be up on Tuesday, the 16th. There's still so much related to the assassination of Charlie Kirk to talk about. So, Victor, we will. That's okay.
I was just saying I was going to get a pillow.
I know. It's as long as you're not taking a sitz bath, we'll be okay.
I'm a sad sack.
That's all right.
Decline it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're not decomposing, not yet anyway. I guess we should start off the show, Victor, by getting your thoughts about the Erika Trump, the very powerful statement, Erika Kirk,
Yes.
very powerful statement she made, her pledge to see TPUSA, Turning Point USA, expand and become more powerful. And then also related to the murder investigation, some criticisms of Kash Patel. So we'll get to those, and we have a few other topics to get your take on, and we'll do all that when we come back from these important messages. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Just quickly want to urge folks to subscribe to Victor's website, The Blade of Perseus. It's $65 a year or $6.50 a month if you want to stick your toe in the water. And you subscribe in order to read Victor's exclusive articles, 2 every week, the exclusive video he does every week for The Blade of Perseus. Plus, there are a ton of free links to Victor's various appearances, books, archives of these shows, etc. So, all that said, Victor, let me just read quickly a headline and a few paragraphs from a story here. Sleeping giant likely woke up for Turning Point USA after Charlie Kirk's assassination. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is brought to, this is from an article, in Fox News by Cameron Arcand. Assassination of Charlie Kirk has brought light to his organization, Turning Point USA, and what comes next for the group known for mobilizing young people in the conservative movement. During live-streamed remarks on Friday night, his widow, Erika Kirk, stressed individuals getting involved with TPUSA, adding that the annual AmericaFest conference in Phoenix this December will continue as scheduled. Quote, to everyone listening tonight across America, the movement my husband built will not die, Kirk said. It won't. I refuse to let that happen. No one will ever forget my husband's name, and I will make sure of it. It will become stronger, bolder, louder, and greater than ever. My husband's mission will not end, not even for a moment. I'll make Turning Point USA the biggest thing that this nation has ever seen. She later added, I love you, baby. Rest in the arms of God. Victor, your thoughts on Erika Kirk herself and your thoughts about the future of the important organization her husband founded and now in her hands.
Yeah, I thought it was really courageous because her husband had just been killed. The children are orphaned. She was in a state of shock. But she wanted to add the additional message that this is not the end, but it's the beginning of a next phase in his honor, a celebration of him. And indeed, after her talk, 18,000 people reportedly signed up for Turning Point. And you listening to her, I'm not going to make any predictions, but she has that same ability to communicate that Charlie did. So I don't know what will be the future, but I think she'll play a prominent role in it. And it's worldwide. There were these huge demonstrations all over the world, in South Korea and in Europe. And you get the impression that that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it was juxtaposed to these awful murders we've seen of Irania Zarutska, and by the way, DeCarlos Brown, we found out his whole family are felons, and brother's a killer too, and they've all been revolving in and out of the criminal justice system. We had that horrible murder we talked about the poor veterinarian, and then we had this couple in your area, Queens, that were killed, butchered, their home. And I think people are just saying, you know what? I'm tired of all of it. I'm just tired of all of the lies. And we're not supposed to talk about Antifa. We're not supposed to talk about all these 403Cs or 403C3s that are funding these groups. And we're not supposed to talk about all these people in the military, in the bureaucracy, teachers, professors who are gloating over his death. We're not supposed to say anything. We're supposed to say both sides, both sides. It's not both sides. And you can see it's not both sides by how many times people mention January 6th, where there wasn't one person violently killed except a Trump supporter, versus 35 that were killed in 5 months of looting, riot, mayhem, 1,500 officers attacked, all leftist, all condoned. Very few of those arrested were ever indicted, and almost none were convicted and imprisoned. So I think everybody's tired of all of it. And it's starting a massive, and maybe she and others like her can ride the crest of the wave and direct it in a positive way. But whatever is going on, I think the left really has made a mistake. As soon as he died, all these people came out and gloated and just, they weren't even the leftist Antifa people. They were those people, but they were teachers, they were professors, they were military officers. It was just, and they all thought they could just say this and it would be mainstream. The internet creates this cowardly culture where no one knows you or gets to you or confronts you, or you don't face anybody, and then you can act very brave with these atrocious postings. And then in addition to that, it was just the news. I mean, Katie Tour we talked about, and Matthew Dowd, and Jasmine Crockett immediately started talking about herself. Oh, I need protection. No, you were one of the instigators of the hate speech. You couldn't finish a talk without demonizing white people. That's all you do, all the time. And then, I get so angry when they say, well, Donald Trump said he shouldn't have said it, but he said if he shot somebody's supporters, that was not advocating that. He said if that's how weird the support is for me. It's not like Gavin Newsom that said we're going to get these SO and bloody them up or punch them in the mouth. We're going to punch Trump in the mouth. Joe Biden, semi-fascist. We're going to take you behind the gym and beat you up. So it's been a different, this desperate effort by Nancy Pelosi and others to contextualize all this. But when you look at Steve Scalise and the Republican leadership that was attacked, you looked at the young couple at the Jewish Museum in D.C., you look at Luigi Mangione, that whole debacle. You look at the attacks on Rand Paul. Josh Shapiro, the guy was a pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian nut. I understand there were people in Minnesota that guy that was crazy may have had right-wing sympathies, but he was appointed to a board by Tim Walz. So I don't know what he was. But it is not both sides. It's the left. Fascist, 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 fascist. Hitler, 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 Hitler. They did it with Bush, but not to the same. And that permeates the atmosphere. And people like this nut, Tyler Robinson, who was gloating, by the way, about the killing on social media or his little chat group and saying, maybe I'll get the award or maybe my doppelganger did it. And then we have all this deviancy that we mainstream. So he's got his roommate who dresses like some kind of animal picture, furry, I guess.
He's a furry, yeah.
Yeah, whatever that is. And we're supposed to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is completely a mental disorder, but we're not supposed to say that. And so I think a lot of people are saying this country cannot survive unless it goes back to traditional American norms, and the nuclear family has to be the dominant paradigm. That doesn't mean you oppress gays or single parents or illegitimacy, but you have to have a critical mass that are a nuclear family, and you have to reproduce the species. And the blue state model and the progressive agenda is antithetical to that. Let's just face it. And it's violent. It's violent because it feels there's no consequences, that they control the law enforcement, the DAs, that they can do things. This guy doesn't really think, when he shot Charlie Kirk, that anything was going to happen to him. He really didn't. He thought he was either going to get away or it was just a lark. And we'll see what Utah does. Final thought real quick is, where does this madness come from? Is it the media madness? I was thinking about this, Jack. I mean, this murder took place on a campus, which was appropriate because, not in the good sense, but you trace every one of these things. The pronouns, you list your pronouns on your memo. Transgenderism is a new civil rights issue. You're a transphobe if you don't want biological males competing in female sports. All of that comes from the university. Separate dorms, separate spaces, separate graduations based on race, racial repertory admissions. California legislature just passed that again, contrary to Prop 209. That comes from critical race theory in the university. You can take almost every pathology that has been manifest either in the Palisades fire or all these killings, these interracial killings, or Charlie, and you can trace the genesis of it to higher education. Where else do Jews get chased into a library by people? Where else do people who beat up a Jew get an award from Harvard University? I mean, that's what it is. Where else does a professor say, you Jews get to that side of the classroom, you other people get over here? That was at Stanford where I'm speaking. So higher education has a lot to account, and that's besides the turning out these ignorant students that don't know anything after paying thousands of dollars and having the country $1.7 trillion in hock to pay these inflated costs, and then have 1.1 million foreign students who are not audited, no background check, and then they form a nucleus in many cases, whether they're Chinese nationals or people from illiberal regimes in the Middle East. They're just not audited. Whether it's espionage or whether it's anti-Semitic protests. So the campus has a lot to answer for, is what I'm trying to say.
Victor, a few more points on what you just said. First of all, I just have to make a plug. The guy over my shoulder here, William F. Buckley Jr., founder of the conservative movement, founded it through his book, God and Man at Yale. So, yeah, this has been the issue for conservatives for 75 years now, fighting the madness of the campus. And the fact that Charlie Kirk my opinion, was making great gains on campuses is the reason he was so hated.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just to add real quickly, almost immediately there was a whole corpus of lies about the motivations and background of this Tyler Robinson. We were told this is the right searching for a George Floyd moment. Number one, Charlie Kirk had no criminal record. He was an outstanding citizen. He was a father, happily married with children. He formed a nonprofit organization to help people. Very tragic that George Floyd died in police custody, but he was a 8-time career criminal. He had served prison. He put a knife to the abdominal region of a woman whose home he broke in for a home invasion. He would have never been in contact with the police if he'd not been trying to pass counterfeit currency and not then tried to resist arrest, he would have been fine probably if he had not been on methamphetamines and fentanyl or a recent case of COVID. Did Officer Chauvin put his knee on his neck beyond what I think was maybe not? I think he probably did. But there's no comparison. One, two, the reaction. Nobody's out rioting for 5 months. There's not $2 billion of damage. There's not a courthouse or precinct or church torched. There's not 35 people murdered. There's not free zones where they take over territory in downtowns of our cities. So that's not the reaction that the George Floyd people did. And then the motivation. He's not a right-wing shooter. His parents may have been moderate Republicans, but just read what he wrote on his shell casings. It was Antifa stuff. It was trans stuff. It was sick stuff. Listen to what his roommate and people said about him. And look at his high school people knew. Everybody knew he was a left-wing angry people. And we're going to find out if there is any connection between his trans partner and the question of trans at the moment he shot him. That's very mysterious. I'm not a conspiracy thing, but I don't know whether he had some type of microphone or an earpiece or somebody gave him a signal, but it is a coincidence, put it that way. It could be accidental coincidence. But there is no evidence at all that he is a right-wing. He is a left-wing pro-Antifa. That's why he engraved his bullets. And his lifestyle was deeply embedded in the left. And so just stop all that. So all of these myths that promulgate about him, about it, is just disgusting.
Well, Victor, it's interesting if we get your thoughts a little more on this furry madness. I saw a video the other day of a lesbian woman who was talking about why am I a color on this flag? Why am I the L in the LGBTQ? Why am I associated with these furries? There's a cabal of them who like to be infantile. People with man-boy lovers. And Rick Grinnell went on this sometime recently, like, look, I'm a gay man. I don't want to see us have gay pride parades walking bottomless in the streets. Like why are we affiliated with these clear mental cases?
Because no one speaks out. All they have to do is write an op-ed and then say, we do not want to be associated with this movement. We are people who are same-sex attracted, but we're otherwise just normal citizens, and we do not like public intoxication, nudity, fornication. We don't like to have these insulting anti-religious parades that gay people do. We don't know what furry is. We don't like biological men destroying women's sport. They can do that, and maybe they will.
Yeah. Well, some of the lesbians I know who organized have protested the affiliation with trans women, whatever the hell that is, have been beaten up and have faced violence. So the trans movement and its embrace of violence is get more and more documented every day.
I'll say one thing. Everybody says, well, there's only been 3 or 4 trans. We had the Charlotte shooter, and there was a tangential relation here, and we had, the Tennessee shooter. We had another one, but there's actually been 4. And everybody said, well, see, there's been all these dozens for years. Yes, but the trans movement was not in the public mind, in the arena, until the last 5 or 6 years. So the proper diagnostic is to go back and say, when was trans mainstreamed and people became aware of it, and then see what is the percentage of people, not what you say on the university campus, but what clinical psychology said about trans dysphoria as a percentage of the demographic, and then see at that point where it became well known to people, at that point, how many of the mass shooters were trans. I don't have that answer, but I have a suspicion that scientific literature will show about 1 or 2 per 100,000 people. And once the trans movement was known of the last mass shootings, it will be higher, much higher than that demographic. And then we need a discussion on what are these neuropsychotic complications of taking very strong antidepressants with strong hormonal treatments, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, as we've had one of the fathers of a trans kid write us, and we've talked about it a couple times. It's also then immersion into a social media, as he calls it, a cult, which is a force multiplier.
Yeah, what he means by that, Jack, is that all of a sudden, if you look, the next Hollywood star is bragging that their child is trans. I mean, it's just, but in the era of, I mean, we knew that there were gay actors all the time, across time and space, and maybe they were cross-dressers, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, was that a common phenomenon among actors to have children that were trans? I don't think it was. And so I don't think these polls, an undergraduate, was at Brown or Dartmouth, I think it was Brown, said that 20% or 25% of the students thought they might consider transitioning. That's what he means when he says it's a cult.
Yeah. Well, Victor, before we go to the break, and after the break, we want to get your thoughts on Kash Patel. I just want to say an impression of Erika Kirk. She kind of reminded me of Caroline Leavitt, the president's press secretary, comms head, just really strong, forceful, unflappable woman, and especially in the face of this horrific tragedy of the murder of her husband.
That's a very good point, Jack, because we're always told by the feminist left that what they want are confident, articulate, well-prepared, strong women. And yet when you see them, like Margaret Thatcher, they melt down. And so what they mean by that is kind of a Karen person. There was a demonstration, I'm in Palo Alto, but there was a demonstration, not somebody just told me that there was a demonstration. She went to Stanford Shopping Center, and I said, well, I guess it was all Karens. She said, yeah, they were all strong, powerful women my age that were very sure of themselves, and that's the model. But when you see Caroline Leavitt or Miss Kirk, I think the difference is that they're not only well-prepared, well-spoken, confident, which the left supposedly approves and wants in today's woman, but I don't know how to say this without being controversial, but it's not just that they're conservative, but they're also beautiful. And so that gets them very upset, because I see that that's not Victor concocting that. It is what people say about Caroline Leavitt, to take one example. Oh, she has too many nice clothes, or oh, she thinks she has great legs. They always comment on her looks, the left does, if she's a Barbie type. But they can't stand the idea that there's a beautiful, young, 27-year-old woman who can stand before the most seasoned, cynical, skeptical, crazy left-wing reporters and go head-to-head with them.
Yeah.
And I give Kayleigh McEnany a lot of credit, because she was sort of founded that idea that you could be a very attractive, well-prepared Trump press secretary and not be afraid of the press.
Amen. Well, Victor, when we come back from this break, we're going to get your thoughts on the controversy of Kash Patel's performance, the FBI director, in response to the murder of Charlie Kirk, and we'll get to that when we come back. Trump's economic warning echoes every currency crisis from Rome to Weimar, and he's not just sounding the alarm, he's showing you the escape route. When Trump signals turbulence ahead, he's reading the same patterns we've discussed: nations drowning in debt, rivals abandoning our currency, and smart money fleeing to gold. But here's what's different. Trump's revealing the IRS strategy to protect wealth through every crisis. It's completely legal, IRS approved, and available to any American who knows where to look. The 2025 Wealth Protection Guide from American Alternative Assets explains this strategy in detail. Visit victorlovesgold.com or call 888-615-8047 for your free guide. In times of monetary chaos, those who act on these patterns prosper. Those who don't become their victims. And we are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Again, we are recording on Sunday, the 14th of September. This episode will be up on Tuesday, the 16th. Victor is in beautiful but crazy Palo Alto, California, in the shadows, I guess, of the Hoover Institution, beautiful building, which must stick in the craw every day of much of the folks.
Yes, they have certain words. They have certain words for the way it looks.
Yeah. Well, Victor, Kash Patel is coming under criticism, including from some conservatives. I think Laura Ingraham, Steve Bannon, and others for his quote unquote performance during the investigation of the murder of Charlie Kirk. Any thoughts about that?
I didn't understand that because I went back and looked at all the people who criticized them. I knew they would from the left, but from the right. Their criticisms were centered on two things: that he was in Washington, and then he announced prematurely that the second suspect was in custody, the shooter. That was mistaken, and at the time he had gone to a restaurant, and the restaurant was expensive. I don't know. I've been to Washington restaurants. They all seem expensive to somebody from Selma. But that's his sin. I mean, he's the head of the FBI. The Utah FBI office was on it. There were local law enforcements. He was monitoring it. He was planning to go out there with Bongino. And I guess he prematurely said, it looks like we got him, and they didn't. And so he corrected it. And then they did get him. And they got him in what, less than 3 days? That was pretty good if you look at the 4 or 5 days of Mangione, and I don't know how long the Tsarnaevs took, but there were people going on Fox News that said, don't expect to catch this guy. He's off the roof, because at that point they only had that silhouette that looked irregular on the top of the roof, and then it was gone. And he said, I heard it maybe 20 times. I watched nonstop Fox that day, and they said, there's just a forest out there. He's just jumped off and he's gone. And then people would come on and say, there's this something called the Rocky Mountains, and you go in there and it's very hard to get you. And he might have a network of friends, and we should not expect the FBI to find him very quickly. But the FBI did find him very quickly. They did all the right things. They went through everybody's private security systems, the neighborhood. They went through the entire corpus of the university's cameras. They talked about everybody there who had a cell phone. And within 24 hours, 24, 30, they had a picture of him. And then they released almost everything you needed to know about him, and they said very clearly, and they got on social media, they tapped into that, they talked to they knew almost everything about him. And then they worked with they worked with all these different federal and state aid. I didn't see what was so bad about it, except that he made a premature statement, and I think he will not do that again. But at this point, you do not want to fire the head of the FBI over that mischaracterization. I've known him for about 20 years. He was the lead investigator for Devin Nunes's House Select Committee on Intelligence, and he was the one, along with Congressman Nunes, that broke the entire Christopher Steele at a time when the FBI was saying, we never paid him anything. They did, and they found that out. He was a contractor. And we never used this dossier at all to get FISA. They did. They not only used it, but they changed an affidavit. And I don't know why the FBI lawyer did that, was not in prison for much longer. But all of the things we know about the dossier, it came out of Devin Nunes and Kash Patel. And they were all threatened by initially in the last days of the Obama administration, but especially as the Obama administration went out, they were doing things that they shouldn't have done. And then when they came in, they were being threatened by career rogue people. Remember, Rod Rosenstein said, I could have you people indicted, and if you do this and that, so I don't see why there's a big outcry. And I think it's already died down, to tell you the truth. He's not going to resign, and he shouldn't.
I do want to encourage our listeners, especially new ones or new viewers, to the archives of the podcast. I think one of the best episodes you ever had, Victor, was your interview with Kash Patel. It was last year, and nobody, I think, at that time thought that he was going to be named the head of the FBI, but it was a terrific discussion. So
I want to remind people what they did to him. When he left, he should have been a renowned catch. He was a masterful investigator, and he couldn't get a job because during the Biden years, he was completely ostracized, both by government and by corporations that did not want to hire him. And I would see him I think twice at the Las Vegas airport. I talked to him. I've had dinner with him a number of times, and they really went out to deplatform him. And his sin was he had helped expose the Steele dossier, and he wasn't quiet about it. So this was part of the Trump strategy of Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Pete Hegseth, to appoint people who had been in conflict with the agencies they were going to run, and in some cases had been targets of abuse by the very agencies they were going to run.
Well, Victor, we're going to read a spot in a little bit, but before I do that, get your take on another issue. And you kind of touched on a related issue, but here's a headline. Survey, 34% of students believe in violence to stop campus speech. The 6th annual college free speech rankings released by the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, and survey partner College Pulse showed that a growing number of students nationwide views violence as an acceptable response to speech, and at least in some circumstances. The survey of 68,510 college students at 257 universities found that 34% now say using violence to stop someone from speaking on campus is acceptable, at least in rare cases. That is an increase of 10 percentage points over the last 4 years. And this poll was done before the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Any thoughts on that?
I'm speaking 200 yards from the Stanford Law School, 300 yards. And when Judge Duncan, a federal circuit judge, was speaking to Stanford law students, the LGBTQ community, mostly the trans community, I guess, they disrupted his talk. And then on spec, the diversity law officer hijacked his lecture, read a prepared statement, blasting him, the guest, for incurring the wrath. And then they tried to drive him out. He had to be protectively escorted with security. And as they went out, they were yelling things like, "I hope your daughter is raped." These were Stanford law students. And so were any of them dismissed? No. And were any of them suspended? No. No. So that was what the left means when these students, when they say they believe in violence, they believe in a particular type of violence. They believe that you illegally occupy the Stanford Free Speech Zone for 4 months, and then when a small little Jewish group tries to put posters, and with permission, of all the hostages' faces, then they go and tear them down. Or they believe they walk by you when you're walking to your office and get in your face and start screaming and yelling at you. That's what they call violence. Or they believe, in the case of Antifa, they show up and they try to attack one or two people, especially speakers at campuses, etc. What they do not mean is they don't say, "I'm a student and I believe in violence, and I'm driving down to Bakersfield in a caravan with my college buddies and my Antifa strongmen, and I'm going to go into downtown Bakersfield and start attacking forms of resistance. Like, I think I'll go after the Future Farmers of America, Bakersfield. I'll go after the police." They don't do that. And you know why they don't do it. And so...
get their hiney stomped.
Yeah, it's just like the 1970s Weatherman Underground, Symbionese Liberation Front, Black Panthers. They were all urban and they had particular targets, but they were not people who would fight back at them. And so they were all predatory. They're very similar to that period in American history from 1880 to 1920 when we had large immigrations from Eastern Europe and from Italy and other places that were still experiencing the fallout from the 1848 revolution, or there were earlier revolutions under the Tsar, and people fled that were left-wing anarchists. And that caused sort of a nativist rebellion. Remember, it was Rome rebellion and some
Romanism, and rebellion.
Yes, and that was we're bringing in Italian anarchist who believed the anarchist movement was very popular, Catholic. So that was kind of a nativist reaction to it. But there was a lot of violence then, as there was in the late 60s and 70s, as there is, I think, in the start now. But I just don't believe that this generation of Antifa or Black Lives Matter is going to really do what they say they do. I just don't do it. I think they realize that they've lost the public dialogue worldwide. I think you're going to see big changes in government in Europe if they allow these conservative candidates to stay on the ballot. And we'll see here too. But if you are upset about what's been happening, as we've discussed today, the answer is not to get violent. The answer, I don't even think, is to go on and make fun of people. That's bad. It's just simply to register and vote. And then the biggest thing that would honor Charlie Kirk is for one of the few times in American history would be for the in-party in a first midterm of an administration. And this is kind of a first midterm of Trump's second administration, to win the House and the Senate in a big margin. We're all said that he's going to lose the House, he may lose the Senate. This happens to every president. Don't get upset. Don't let it happen. Get whole armies of young people to register and get out and vote. And just tell the Democratic Party, we're sick of you. You people have been condoning violence. You've been calling the President of the United States all these names. You lie about all of these types of shooting, and we're just tired of it. We're tired of the DAs. We're tired of the blue state model. We're tired of all of it. And we're not going to take it anymore. And so but unlike you, we're not going to anonymously trash people on social media or commit violence and shoot people. What we're going to do is vote you out of power.
Well, I have after the break, and I'll ask you another question before that, but I think I'll raise this article Roger Ayer's written about potential violence in Europe. Victor, well, let me ask you about J.K. I just want to mention along the lines what we just talked about. J.K. Rowling, the great author who's kind of a woman left of center and has been tormented into becoming a champion of free speech, especially by the attacks on her by the trans community. She wrote, following the murder of Charlie Kirk the other day, if you believe free speech is for you, but not your political opponents, you're illiberal. If no contrary evidence could change your beliefs, you're a fundamentalist. If you believe the state should punish those with contrary views, you're a totalitarian. And if you believe political opponents should be punished with violence or death, you're a terrorist. I think that's pretty darn accurate assessment of things, but I may be off a little bit. And your thoughts on her thoughts, Victor?
I've been in the public square 40 years in a minor way, perhaps, but when I try to criticize somebody, I try to double check. I think I've had one retraction, and it was on a historical point in about 3,000 columns. I try to be very careful before I criticize someone. And I've had a lot of people who wrote me whom I've criticized and said, thank you, we don't agree, but you weren't ad hominem. It's very important not to be ad hominem. And when I've done, I don't know, maybe 50 debates, I've always tried to, at the end of the debate, not be angry at the person. But I will tell you that it's not the same with the left, and I think it's partly ideological. The right is sort of a live and let live. Politics is a compartment of my life, my family, my church, my community, my business, my career is more important than my ideology. But for the left, it consumes people. because they think they're morally superior because the left was always for the victim. And so therefore any means necessary or justified to correct the alleged injustices that allow victims to persist, victimization. So I think we got to be very careful and make that point. It's a left-wing phenomenon at this point, what the violence is coming from, and they're not apologetic. They're unapologetic about it. And I think until there are consequences at the ballot box, they're going to continue to do it. And I think we're going to have a whole new conversation about race. I think people are going to come out of the woodwork and say, we want to help the black community. We being the Hispanic community, the Asian community, the LGBTQ community, the white, everybody. And by that we mean we want parity, not mandates of equality of result, but equality of opportunity. We'll do our part for equality, but we want, especially males of the black community, to send a message that they want their two-parent family percentages the same as every other community, and the way they had almost been in the 1940s and 50s, as Thomas Sowell has so well documented. And we want the crime rate, violent crimes in America, we don't want any, but if it's not going to be any different than our demographic. 3 or 4% of blacks are black males, 15 to 40. That 3% will commit 3% of violent crimes, not 50%. And we will work on that, and we'll have a national dialogue. What do you need from every other resource to help get that message that rap music, hip-hop music will be sort of like soul music in the 60s, or jazz. It will be a wonderful black medium, but it will not have things like kill popo or kill the BITCH or kill the HO and all that stuff. It's not going to be there. We're going to self-police it. And I think if that would really, but that conversation can't be taken. You can't talk about it. Just like you can't talk about biological men and women's sports because of the odium that comes from the left. But I think now you can talk about it. That's my point. I think people are going to say, do your worst, I'll do my best, good luck. But we're not going to take it anymore. And I think that doesn't mean that we're going to emulate the left's tactics. We're going to take the high road. But
well, let's drill down on that a little more, Victor, when we come back from these final important messages. If tomorrow you needed life-saving medication, would you have it? Flu season is here and COVID cases are climbing again. That's why so many are turning to All Family Pharmacy to prepare now. They're fighting for your medical freedom, giving you access to medications that have been blocked or hard to find at other pharmacies. Now you can get ivermectin and mebendazole for 25% off, starting at just $2 per capsule. Plus, you can save an extra 10% with code VICTOR10. You'll also find antibiotics, antivirals, hydroxychloroquine, and more of the treatments you actually want on hand. All Family Pharmacy connects you with licensed doctors who review your order, write the prescription, and your medications ship straight to your door. It's fast, secure, and simple. Don't wait until it's too late. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use code VICTOR10 to save today. We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on Sunday, the 14th of September, and this episode is up on the 16th. Jack Fowler, that's me. I write a weekly email newsletter called Civil Thoughts, and you can get it. You go to civilthoughts.com, sign up every Friday. It comes in your inbox in the afternoon, and it has 14 recommended readings. I know you're going to like it. I get a lot of emails from folks saying they deeply appreciate it. It's totally free. We're not selling your name. civilthoughts.com. Victor's self-medicating there. He's going to...
That's salt water, everybody. It's not... It's called X-Clear's salt water.
We want you around, Victor. So
it's from that 3 months ago operation. So... Yeah.
Keep up with the salt water. Hey, so I mentioned before Roger Eyre had a piece, and then we had a piece. You just talked about Thomas Sowell, but one of our listeners, Vivek, I hope I say his name right, Subramanyam, he was writing about the Thomas Sowell which we've so forgotten. What was it like to be a black in America in, say, 1960? And it's a radically different world.
I
He
know what it
says,
was like because I was around in 1960, even in a small town. But more importantly, as someone who had lunch twice a month with Tom for 15 years, I asked him, and it was prejudice, open and overt in the South, but maybe insidious. And what it did to people like Tom, it made him not just want to excel, but to excel and be preeminent above everybody as a personal challenge. And he knew he had the talent. I mean, very few people have that natural talent, but he had a tremendous work ethic, and he was defiant. And he was going to do his way, and if people left or right criticized him, it just rolled off his back. But, he said something to me, and I don't want to quote him if he wouldn't want it to be known. He said, we were talking about a health issue, and he said, there were some phenomenal black doctors when I grew up, Victor. He said, they knew everything. And I said, well, explain to me. And he said, I went to them all the time. He said they were better than white doctors because they had to be to get into medical school and then to get residency. And they were dealing with inner city problems, immigration problems. They saw every type of disease, injury, trauma. They were empirical. They were classically trained as doctors. And I was so lucky to have been around them. But he said, once you lowered the standards for that particular group, then it was hard. So I said, well, would you extend that analysis today? And he said something like the following. I'm quoting from about 10 years. He said, well, I kind of prefer Asian doctors now. And he didn't mean it racially. I said, well, now, why would that be? And he said, because it's so hard for them to get into medical school. He said, this isn't a racial question at all. It's just which particular group does society target on with discrimination or reverse discrimination, and which group do they not do that? And he said, if you're in a particular group and you're stigmatized collectively, it tends to make talented people defiant, and then they overcome these. He said, I'm not advocating that there should be these hurdles, but unfortunately when society wrongly makes them, as they have done for 30 years with Asians who they claimed were overrepresented. So when you see an Asian doctor, you get the impression that it was very hard for him to get into medical school. That's just the way he thought. It was always contrarian, and in a way that people, I think that was one of his powers. He would sit back and look at society and observe it, and then see its quirks, and then point them out. And he was often misunderstood because he was fearless in explicating his observations, but he was often right. I was in a club with a very good African-American doctor, and I used to talk to him a lot about Frank Snowden. He was a famous black classicist that was a really brilliant guy, and he had a brilliant son who was at Yale, a historian, Snowden. But I would talk to him about medicine, and he was a great surgeon, and he would tell me what it was like trying to go to medical school in the 50s and trying to get residencies in the 60s, and all of the different patients he saw and how overworked he was. And the result of it is, by the time he was in his 60s and 70s, a lot of very distinguished white surgeons were consulting him when they had a problem. I said, hey, have you seen this thing? Have you ever treated something? And he had. And it was I think we need to get back to that we just look at people as individuals, and we don't put these barriers on the collective as we do. And if we have medical school and we have all Asian ophthalmologists, I just want the best pilots, ophthalmologists, sort of like I extend the same thing to professional sports. I wouldn't want a quota system in the NBA or something. Blacks are overrepresented. Why can't we just have 12% blacks in the NBA? Because the African American community would say, rightly so, we believe in merit. And black athletes excel in basketball because we have acculturated it, we put time in it, we study it, we encourage people to work hard, and therefore we dominate. And if you don't like it, then maybe you should try to do the same thing we are. But we don't apply that ideology to other fields.
Well, quick follow-up on this piece. Again, it's by Vivek Subramaniam, and he says, first of all, the Thomas Sowell book that has so much of this comparative generational info is Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. That's one thing. Just one little vignette. He said, less well known is the success of schools like the Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C., an overwhelmingly impoverished black school, which in 1953 sent 81% of its graduates to college, more than any white school in the tri-state area. So things were quite different once upon a time. How'd they get that way, Victor? And I guess if you have to blame one thing, according to this, it's Lyndon Johnson's.
I said it before, when I was farming and I needed a job because I was losing money, and I'd been out of graduate school 4 years of the PhD, and I was on a tractor. So I went to Cal State, and I made a pitch. I said I could teach Latin. Well, we don't want Latin and Greek. And then I met another. No, we'll give you one Latin class. And then I thought, oh my God, I made $400 a month. Maybe I could make $8. So I went to go see the other dean. He said, well, we have a high minority. This is a 55% Hispanic, 10%, 15% Hmong, and poor white. They don't go to Cal State to take Latin. I said, it's not about Latin and Greek. It's about training young people to speak, write well, get a master's maybe, but go into education, law, medicine. I can place these people all over the Ivy League if in graduate schools, but not even that, any graduate school. Just give me a chance. Oh, no. So finally they did. And, for 20 years, I would say all my students, with very few exceptions, were either part of the Oklahoma diaspora, that their grandparents or parents came from Oklahoma in the 1930s to 40s, or they were Mexican Americans, or they were foreign nationals of Mexico, or they were part of the Hmong Southeast Asia diaspora. And it was wonderful. I never saw any difference whatsoever in natural talent predicated on race. I know a lot of people say, well, there are I didn't see it. But I did, and we did send dozens they became very successful, but it was completely, what I'm getting at, Jack, it was an antithesis of the DEI attitude. These people are oppressed, they're victims, they need special help. And it was when I had a seminar in ancient history, I said, you're going to speak perfect English and you're not going to use any notes. And the person would come up and say, well, stop. No, you knows. You're not going to say once. Yeah. No us. No us either. No notes. And we had a wonderful faculty. We had about 4 wonderful professors with me finally, but it was successful. And the biggest challenge, where did it come from? It came from La Raza. I had La Raza professors that would come over and say, you're expropriating their culture. My students' culture is not Western, it's Latin American. I said, I don't really care what you think their culture is. They're in the United States, and I want them to succeed. And you succeed in America when you can write well and speak perfectly. And that's what we're going to do. And these people know more grammar and syntax than most of the whole faculty in your program. And so, and the left, that was when I really got upset at the left. I mean, I had been kind of a maverick in my family voting conservatively, but it was only after I saw that the people who were the most opposed to upward mobility of individuals as minorities were the left, because they wanted them to be an oppressed collective that needed their representation and their careers.
I'm going to hold off this Rod Dreher story for our next episode, but since you raised family, Victor, and we have to be a little shorter on our recordings today, but let's talk about your mom, who was a judge. What would your mom think about these magistrates, which I know there's a difference between a judge and a magistrate, but that a magistrate can magistrate as a verb without any education, any formal education. And yet, if you wanted to be a barber in the same North Carolina town that magistrate let these lunatics out to murder people, you would need over 1,000 hours of training to cut somebody's hair.
She would be shocked. I mean, she grew up in the house where I'm living in, and she was the fourth generation to live there. No one had ever gone to college, and her father had three girls, she and her sister, and her oldest sister was completely bedridden with polio. And so my grandfather said, you girls have to get educated because you're not going to be able to go out and save the farm. That was the idea, save the farm, save the farm, save the farm. And so she was 17 and she ran for student body president, and she was elected at high school, first one to be a woman. And then she immediately started haranguing about the Japanese relocation because we had a lot of neighbors, and she was an activist and went to the local Selma Enterprise and with Lowell Pratt and got a lot of articles written, and then helped my grandfather get people to make sure that farms that were confiscated, the rent was put into a deposit account, and the larger corporations didn't buy them up, which happened. My father had a football scholarship to play with Alonzo Stagg at University of Pacific. That was a big powerhouse football, and he and his first cousin, who was really his brother because his first cousin's father was blind and his mother died during childbirth. He was an only child. So the two of them were big Swedes, and they played tight ends for Alonzo Stagg. And so my mom met him and went to UOP and got a BA, but she wanted to be a lawyer to help the farm. So Stanford was not taking people with UOP. They weren't taking people that had BAs from UOP, and they weren't taking people who were women. So she went up to Stanford and got another BA from Stanford, then was admitted as one of the first women, I think, 1944. And she got this degree. I still have some of the letters where they were very well-meaning letters, but they say, Pauline, you're doing very well, but you'll never be able to compete with men. And if you were able to compete with men, they have to be the breadwinner. And you would be taking a job during the war away from a man. And then she would write polite letters, but I'll tutor, I'll do this. So she did very well. And then they all, being Stanford right at the end of the war when everybody was at war, they did have a need for lawyers. She couldn't get a job. So she waited till my father, Victor was killed. Everybody thought Victor would make it because he only had one battle, Okinawa, and they thought that Bill would be killed, my father, because the B-29s were a disaster. They were dropping out of the sky. They were crashing on Tinian. They had 1,600 miles. He had to fly 40 missions. But he survived. So they quickly got married, and there were no jobs. And my father was farming 20 acres and trying to go teach high school, and then he was trying to get a master's to teach college and farming. They had no money. We had an 800-square-foot home that he moved. He found a wrecked house. It was 800 square foot. He moved it onto the farm. My grandfather let him do it. And I lived there till I was 7. Then he built himself a little add-on, but he never connected the houses. So we grew up with 2 houses next to each other, one with a kitchen, living room, and one with the bedrooms. And in the rain, we'd get all wet. My mom would say, I did get a law degree. Don't you think we could have a cover between the 2 homes? And we worked on the farm nonstop on weekends and after school. But anyway, so my mom was 41 and no one would hire her. And then finally, we were really in trouble. And then when we were little kids, she got a job at the appellate court being a researcher. And she was really good at it. She was very bright. And she was dynamic. And she worked her way up to the head attorney. And then when she was 50, she was made a superior court. She had a wonderful colleague, Annette LaRue, who was also another woman and they were just 2 women. And then they made her appellate court. And then she was really one of the highest ranking, one of the first appellate court women in California, if not the first, I'm not sure. And then she got a meningioma brain tumor. They said it was benign, but it wasn't. And she died young. She got it when she was 63. She died at 66. And but I'm getting the Tom Sowell point is that when I would come home and I'd say, I'd say I'm at graduate school. Everybody went to, prep school, and there's only 4 of us in the PhD program in classical languages. and I'm supposed to go to archaeological digs in the summer. I'm supposed to take intensive French so I can speak it as well as pass it. And here I am out here pulling Johnson grass in the summer. I said, Mom, you can't be a graduate student. I'm 22 years old and drive home every week and help my grandfather, on the ranch or with the raisins because I can't compete. And she said, you think that's bad? And then when I didn't get a job, because they were 1975, they weren't hiring white males, and nobody got a job. And then I came home and she said, well, then farm. I didn't get a job, and be the best you can. And then when I got a part-time job, I waited 5 years. I went up to Fresno State for 4 years in a row, and I'd say, I would like a job teaching Latin. Oh, we don't need you. And by the way, nobody with a PhD in classics farms, so your background is so hokey. You're farming and you do this. And then she would always tell me, that's not bad. You're doing wonderful. Keep going. I said, Mom, I'm 30. I'm going to be 30 years old pretty soon. And I made $6,000 this year, and I'm trying to save this farm with you. And my grandfather had died. My father was working both jobs. My grandmother, we were living with my grandmother who had Alzheimer's. She was 90. And I said, 3 kids. And she was wonderful. And then she said, and then when I do it and I started writing books right before she passed away, she said, well, you're doing just what I did, and I have no worries, and you'll be fine. But she did give me a piece of advice that stop working so much, enjoy things. So I was really lucky. I had a wonderful mother, father, grandparents. That's why I really think that's one of the reasons I really like Charlie Kirk. We had a talk, I think it was August 23rd after my interview, and I had talked to him in Phoenix the year and a half before, and he said to me, don't you think the problem is not political? I said, yes. And I said, the red state model works, the blue state model doesn't, but that doesn't mean you abandon the blue state model. And he said, no, that's where I went. I went to Pennsylvania, Michigan. We won those states because we got 17 to 18% of the youth vote. A greater 17% larger margins in 2024 than we did in 2020. And we appealed to social issues. And he kept saying, you've got to tell young people to stop the prolonged adolescence, stop the victimization. I know it's hard to buy a house. The party has to work on home buying, cheap energy, cheap gas, buying cars, buying houses, getting married in your mid-20s, having children before you're 30. Get on the road. That's what he was saying. And it was exactly what I'd heard I got married when I was 23 and had 3 kids, by the time I was 30, and I didn't have them, obviously, but that was what he was trying to say. And stop this 6 units here, 9 units here, 2 units here, 8 years to graduate, part-time job here, angry that no one preached my genius. I have a BA in sociology and I'm making $20,000, and a guy with a high school degree and a welder is making more. This is unfair. The Mandami crowd complaint. So that's why I really liked Charlie, because he understood that if the Republican Party could create an ethos in which younger people were really proud of their country and the system, and they felt that by marrying and creating a nuclear family and having 2 or 3 children and raising them not to be in the therapeutic, mode, then they were doing a lot for the country. I didn't hear anybody saying that, to tell you the truth. I wasn't saying that.
Well, he was a fan of the show, Victor. I saw him at a conference once, and I said something. He says, "You're the guy that does." We weren't on video yet. You're the guy that does the Victor Davis Hanson show. You could tell from your voice. Then he made fun of the way my Bronx accent, which is okay.
Yeah, he mentioned that to me, and he mentioned Sammy too. So yeah, he listened to us.
Yeah, the great Sammy. So, well, Victor, we're going to conclude today with how we typically do. I'm going to read a comment or two. Let me just read 2 here. They're both from, I'm pretty sure they're from YouTube. By the way, we had a show the other day. I think it's close to 300,000 people have seen it on YouTube and probably 1,500 plus comments. So it's tough to read them all, folks. But here's one from Robert White 8931 who writes, "Thanks, VDH, for your call to register and to vote in the midterms. An excellent way to honor Charlie Kirk. Thanks also for the great history lesson." I think that he was listening to the show you just did with Sammy on, in part on General Sherman. Was terrific. And then there's one from Kaiser Durden who writes, "I worked in Charlotte and used the light rail for 1 week. Stopped after I got confronted by a homeless guy with a knife in the parking lot one evening returning from work. Charlotte is a savage jungle." Wow.
I would just comment before we leave on one thing that I got really angry about, and I mentioned it. I think I mentioned it. It was on a Newsmax show, or it was on an interview I did. Right before Charlie died, he commented on the light rail murder of Erika Zarutska. I'm pronouncing that right. And he said, this racial stuff has to stop. And Van Jones blasted him after he died. Remember that? And he said, you should be ashamed. There was no evidence. There was evidence, Van Jones. There was all sorts of evidence. When she came into that light rail, she did not stereotype people by their race. She sat right down in front of a black man with a hoodie on, and to her right, I think there were 2 or 3 other black people. When that person decided to kill somebody, because he said things, he was as close to the 3 black people who were sitting completely adjacent to him than he was the white person. So let's say there's 4 people. He had a 25% chance to kill the white person. He chose the white person. He bypassed the 3 black people. Then when he got out, we were told that the video had been doctored, or he did not say, I got the white girl. Maybe I said I would apologize. I haven't seen evidence that he didn't say that, because I heard it on the tape. I don't know if you did, Jack, but I heard it twice. Said, got the white girl. But maybe it was doctored. But the point I'm making is, I saw something in National Review by, is it Philip Klein? I like him. I like what he writes. But he said, you can't blame the 3 African-American people for walking by. They may have been scared. He had a point, but I think he missed the message because they were eyeing, I saw especially the woman across from her, were eyeing for a second what that guy was doing. They didn't say anything. They froze. They froze. I could see that. They were scared. Or they thought if they did anything, they'd end up in jail or accused like Daniel Penny was accused. But then he got up and he was dripping blood. You could see it. And then you could see her once he got up just staring, looking for some moment before eternity, and they all got up. There was nobody stopping them then. They all got up and walked right by her in her death throes. Couldn't someone just say, hold her hand and say, I'm with you? Nobody did. So what I'm suggesting is, if he did say that, which the video records, and I haven't seen evidence that it was doctored, then it was racial. And if he decided of all the victims he was going to kill, and he had just as much propensity of 2 people sitting right to his side, he picked somebody of a different race. And then people of a different race didn't do anything. Now, you can suggest that that was all accidental. I'm not sure it was. And that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to say. And for him to attack him after he died and say he was trying to create racial foment, he was trying to be empirical. And
yeah, the empirical is, Victor, of the 100,000 people, 5 white men between the ages of 15 and 64, 5.2 of the 100,000 will commit murder. Of black women, it's 7.2. So black women are more likely to be murderers than white men are. And then of black men, it's 95. So that's 18 times what a white man. So these numbers, and that's just murder. It doesn't even talk about
people
murder,
need to
white
talk,
on black, black on white.
They don't need to stereotype people, but they need to talk about it, because it's something that liberal whites know. They're afraid they know it. They navigate around it. They accuse people who mentioned it, but they know it, and they don't have a solution for it except to call people racist. And the black leadership on the left, not the right, but on the left, feels that it fuels their career as the official spokeswoman. And what Charlie said, I went back and looked at, he essentially said, if a young, attractive 23-year-old black woman walked into a light rail and there was a white guy, scruffy looking, with a hoodie on, and there were three black people there. If there were three white people in the seats adjacent to him, and the black girl sat in a sea of white people, and this white person carefully, premeditatively took out his knife, went over and slashed this girl's neck, and then walked out and said, got the black girl, while three white people looked to the side as he was doing this and didn't do anything. And then as she looked around as the murderer, left, and now there was no immediate threat, and all three of the white people then walked right by her, gave her a glancing look as she was falling into her death throes, and didn't even attempt something, then America might probably have had a George Floyd reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can't solve it unless you accept what the it is. So
that's what Charlie said, and I really got angry that Van Jones besmirched his reputation when he couldn't reply. That was all.
Yeah. Well, Victor, you've been terrific, as you always are. I know you're there with your salt water and pills and drinks.
Whatever I have, I'm going to find out, because once you go to... You go into the labyrinth of medicine up here, you don't come out.
Well, we'll be on the other end waiting for you. So thanks very much for all you did. Again, I want to urge people to visit Victor's website, The Blade of Perseus, victorhansen.com. Do subscribe. If you're on Twitter, X, Victor's handle is @VDHansen. On Facebook, VDH's Morning Cup. And there's a great Victor Davis Hansen fan club there. Civilthoughts.com. Sign up for my newsletter. Thanks very much, folks. We will see you soon with another episode of the Victor Davis Hansen Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching.